Open on tight close up. A rough wooden box. Copper coils visible through a gap in the slats. Dim basement light. Dust on the shelf. There's a wooden box sitting in the corner of an Amish workshop in Ohio. That IT looks like nothing. A scrap project. Maybe $80 in parts. And it has been quietly powering that family's home. Every light, every appliance, every tool in the shop. For over 100 years. No solar panels. No generator. No electric bill. Pause. And the reason you've never heard of it? That part is going to make your blood boil. That if you've ever opened a power bill and felt that sick feeling, that quiet rage that you can't even explain because everyone pays it, everyone accepts it. So what are you even angry about? This video is for you. If you've ever sensed that something was taken from you before you were old enough to notice it was gone, stay right here. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you live, because what I'm about to show you works in the home you already own. Right now, this month. Let's go. I want to tell you about the moment my entire understanding of energy broke in half. I was standing in a farmhouse outside Millersburg, Ohio. Old house. Wooden floors. Smell of sawdust and something baking. I'd driven 11 hours to get there, notebook in my jacket pocket, because I'd heard rumors, and I mean that word seriously, rumors, about how these communities kept their lights on without the grid. I spent 10 full minutes looking for the breaker panel. I checked the garage. I checked the utility room. I was crouched behind a chest freezer, running my hand along the baseboard, when the old man sitting at the kitchen table finally laughed. His name was Jonas. He was in his 80s. And he pointed, not to a wall, not to a panel, but to a small wooden cabinet sitting behind the wood stove. That was it. That was the whole system. I stood there with my hand still on that freezer door, and I felt something shift in my chest. Not excitement. Not curiosity. Embarrassment. Because I suddenly understood that I had been, my entire life, paying for something I didn't have to pay for. And I hadn't even known to ask why. Here is the first thing most people get wrong. The Amish are not anti-technology. Say it again, they are not anti-technology. They are anti-dependency. There is a difference so profound it should change how you see everything. In 1919, a bishop in Lancaster County named Moses Hartz issued one of the first formal community rulings on electricity. The ruling wasn't that electricity was sinful. It was that connecting to the public grid was forbidden, because that cord running out to the road tied the community to the outside world in a way nobody inside could control. The problem wasn't the current. The problem was the cord. From that ruling forward, every Amish settlement in America quietly began building its own parallel system, generating electricity, storing it, using it for exactly what needed it. They didn't invent these methods. They preserved them, methods that had been published openly in the Sears Roebuck catalog as late as 1923. Methods that farm families across Iowa and Nebraska used routinely before 1936, before something happened that changed everything. You were probably taught this was a triumph. Lights coming on across America. Progress marching into the countryside. And maybe it was, for some people, in some ways. But here's what they don't teach you. The same legislation that funded the power lines also funded a public relations campaign. I've read the bulletins myself. They're in the National Archives. And those bulletins specifically instructed farmers to stop maintaining their own independent generating equipment. The message was simple. Home generation is dangerous. It's primitive. It's uneconomical. Sign up for the line. Pay the meter. Throw the old equipment in the scrap pile. Millions of families did exactly that. The Amish did not. They kept the equipment. They kept the knowledge. They kept the manuals. While the rest of rural America traded its energy independence for the convenience of a switch on the wall, Amish families quietly moved everything into barns and basements. And they passed it, father to son, hand to hand, for the next 90 years. That's the wooden box on the shelf. In 1947, two engineers at Cornell University, Harold Pinder and William Delmare, published a study on small-scale residential power generation. Their conclusion: a properly built household induction generator, fed by the natural flow of water through a 1-inch pipe at modest pressure, could supply enough electricity to run the lighting, refrigerator, well pump, and small appliances for a 4-person household. Indefinitely. Cost in 1947, $42. Adjusted for today, roughly $80. The study was published. It was read. It was cited. And then it disappeared. Why? Because in 1948, the very next year, The first wave of investor-owned utility expansion began consolidating rural electric cooperatives into the centralized billing systems you still live under today. A homeowner who could power his own house for $42 was a homeowner who would never pay a monthly bill. That homeowner was a problem, not a moral problem, a financial problem. The Cornell study wasn't banned. It was simply allowed to fade. The pamphlet went out of print. The engineering department stopped teaching it. The next generation of electricians was trained on grid wiring, not on home generation. Within 20 years, almost nobody outside a few isolated farming communities even remembered the technique existed. The Amish remembered. Of course they remembered. By the time I sat at Jonas's kitchen table in 2019, his family was on the third generation of the same basic device. His grandfather built the original in 1934. His father rebuilt it in 1968. Jonas maintains it now. His son is learning to maintain it next. Let that land. The same device. 90 years. 4 generations of one family. 0 electric bills. The principle is almost insultingly simple, which is exactly why nobody talks about it. Moving water, even slow-moving water, contains usable kinetic energy. A small turbine, something the size of a coffee can, placed inside a 1-inch supply line, can spin fast enough to drive a permanent magnet alternator that produces between 200 and 600 watts of continuous power. Continuous. 24 hours a day. 365 days a year. No sun. No wind. No fuel. The water coming into your house from your well or your municipal supply. It's already moving. It's already doing work. The Amish simply attached a second purpose to that work. And they've been quietly running their lives on that second purpose for over a century. A man in Holmes County named Eli Miller showed me the device his father built in 1971. It sits inside a stone spring house about 40 feet from his back door. The spring delivers roughly 3 gallons per minute, year-round. The generator produces around 320 watts continuously. That's enough to keep a battery bank charged that runs his entire workshop, his lighting, his refrigerator, and a freezer in the basement. He hasn't bought electricity from anyone in 53 years. The original copper coil his father wound by hand, still working. He's replaced the bearings twice. Twice. In 53 years. That is the entire maintenance history of the device. And when I asked Eli what it felt like to open the electric bill, he looked at me like I'd asked what it felt like to be kicked by a horse you didn't own. Now here's where I need you to lean in, because this is the part most people miss. You might be thinking, I don't have a stream. I don't have a spring. I live in a suburb with a quarter-acre lot and a municipal water hookup. Stay with me. The single most overlooked source of usable kinetic energy on any existing American property is the pressurized water line that already enters your home. That line delivers water at somewhere between 40 and 80 pounds per square inch of pressure. Every time a faucet opens, every time a toilet flushes, every time the washing machine fills, that pressure is energy. Most of it is currently being wasted as heat and noise inside your pipes. A properly placed inline microturbine, the kind that fits between 2 standard threaded fittings and costs about $35, captures a portion of that pressure as rotational energy, converts it to electricity through a small alternator about the size of a soup can. I installed one in my own basement in 2021. Total parts cost $78.40. I have the receipt in a drawer upstairs. I put it on the cold water line running to my washing machine. That line sees heavy use 2 or 3 times a week. The unit produces a small, steady trickle of electricity every time water flows. It charges a 12-volt battery that runs all the LED lighting in my workshop and garage. My workshop has not been on grid power since the spring of 2022. Nobody from the utility company knows. Nothing about my house looks different from the outside. The only visible change is a small wooden box mounted next to my pressure tank. Jonas showed me the Amish version of this same idea, and I have to tell you, it stopped me cold. He uses the gravity-fed gray water line, leaving the kitchen sink. Every time someone in the house washes dishes, the water flowing down that drain spins a tiny turbine on its way out. The generator produces enough current to keep the pantry light on for the next several hours. He calls it the dish lamp. His grandchildren think it's funny. It also works every single day, with 0 input from anyone in the family. That is the genius of this entire approach. You are not adding work to your life. You are harvesting work that is already being done. Now I want to tell you the part one held back. The part one learned on my third visit to Jonas's farm, sitting on his back porch in October of 2022, eating apple butter on bread his wife had baked that morning. This one genuinely surprised me. I have not seen it published anywhere else in modern writing. It came up when I asked Jonas why his system had never failed, even through the worst winter storms. When the pipes froze and the spring dropped to a trickle, he was quiet for a minute. Then he told me about the standing column.